Welcome to another episode of the Blast Motion Podcast. I'm Kyle Attl. Today we are joined by New York Empire's Jordan Baltimore, a facility and travel program out of New York with 1,000 players and 70 teams. Been in the game for about 15 years on the front end of technology. Today we're going to talk with Jordan about a holistic approach with coaches, how to use data, working with players, being the filter as a coach to get players exactly what they need. So without further ado, let's dive right into our conversation with New York Empire's Jordan Baltimore. Jordan, how are you doing today and where are you at in the world?
Doing great. Coming off a rainy weekend, so tons of indoor training here in New York. We're halfway through our fall season, so excited to continue and then jump into off-season training.
Awesome. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your program, what you guys do, what your mission is, what you guys really take pride in, so we can learn a little bit about you and your program.
Yep. So we launched about 15 years ago or 15 and a half years ago with this concept that, science-backed instruction and the reality of human movement might be better than anecdotal discussions on what I did when I was 10 years old. And some of the technology that was around, it was limited, right? 15 years ago, but some of the technology that was out there was instrumental in helping us tell the story that you don't swing down at a baseball, or, you don't throw your hands or just make contact, so to speak. So here we are 15 years later, 1,000 ball players, 70 some odd teams, young all the way up through, young ball players all the way up to pros are here in our facility training. And we play games all over the New York area, primarily here in Manhattan. Philosophically, we are process over outcome is the easiest way to say it, right? We're thinking all the time about what, people say all the time, control what you can control. I feel like that's too general and rhetorical a thing to think about as a young ball player. So instead, we've broken it down into a framework of inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Inputs are the only things I can control as a ball player. Right? How hard do I swing? How hard do I train? What are the movements that I'm working on? And what do I take from cage to game? Outputs are what happens to the bat and the ball as a result of the inputs, right? And they're not always perfect, right? They're influenced heavily by the inputs. And then outcomes are where the entire, the world, baseball and otherwise, are focused, right? Did you get a hit? Did you get a double? Did you get an RBI? I can't control those things as a ball player. Right. I hit a bomb to left center field, 100 miles off the bat, and center fielder lays out, makes a play in left center field and puts it in his pocket. And on the next at bat, I check swing, bust my bat, dump it in over the first baseman's head, and it's a double down the right field line because I hustled. Which one was a success, which one was a failure, right? You and I both know that over time, the first one's going to play really well, and I'm going to have a career in baseball. The second one, I'm playing the wrong game, and I'm not going to last very long. So, that's where Blast came in for us, right? What a perfect transition, and it sat well with our focus on inputs.
That's awesome. I love that you guys break it down into something that's tangible for the players. I recently got back into kind of the travel ball world just a little bit and with the teams, and you just hear so many high-level things that I don't think that the players understand. You hear it all throughout, and they're kind of these high-level metaphors or thoughts, and it's tough for the player to dive in and really understand what that means. So I like that you guys broke it down into that system. I do think it's a good transition into like what you guys do with Blast. Using technology for 15 years now, you guys were definitely ahead of the curve. Talk a little bit about how you guys use Blast, and maybe it fits into that structure of kind of breaking it down for the player to understand, and share a little bit about how you guys incorporate Blast.
Sure. I mean, look, the one thing we've noticed over time is the more integrated Blast is into the training, and the more diligent a player is about making sure they're using it at every opportunity, the better the results have been, or maybe the faster the results have been, right? Because one of the key things we focus on is what I said earlier, is cage to game, right? You got plenty of guys who hit cage bombs and then get into the game and they're afraid to swing, or they take a different approach, or whatever it is they want to talk about. And for us, the critical piece is you need to be better in game, or you should want to be better in game than you are in the cage, right? Don't set PRs in the cage, set them in the game. You'll be a better ball player. And that mental and emotional challenge gets solved with Blast, because, what's the saying? There is a saying that I do love. It's if you don't count it, it doesn't count if you don't count it. And having the ability to look back moments later, or maybe the end of the day, to see wow, my in-game swings are in line with my cage swings, or wow, I'm swinging 25% slower in game, or my approach, my attack angle has changed in game. I'm just going straight down to the ball. No wonder why, in practice I'm doing great, in training I'm doing great, and in the game I'm not. I know what I need to focus on. It's not another baseball lesson. It's transitioning what I do into the game. So, when we see players who look in our travel program, we actually charge the sensors here in our facility for our players. So they walk in, they take BP, we take them off their bats after BP, charge them, give them back right before the game. They go out with the coaches. This way we have full compliance. Everybody's, ready to go all the time. And we've made a tremendous investment in making sure of that, because we see the results. For other players in the organization, maybe guys who either haven't yet gotten their own sensor or they just come in for lessons, we put a sensor on there because we want them to see the before, the during, and the after. Right? Let's understand what the results are and what that's going to bring for you. And then, of course, we tie it into what are the outputs, what are the outcomes, so that we can see, are you developing over time? So virtually every player we work with is touching a blast sensor at some moment. And for the really young kids where, blast sensor is not needed for 4, 5, 6, 7 years old even. And we kind of like to get it in on a 7-year-old's bat, because if you're playing competitive 7U baseball, for whatever that means, it's good to start to get into the habit of being able to measure, if nothing else, intent, right? Am I maximizing bat speed, right? Because we don't want to slow them down with some of the more mechanical cues. So at the youngest age, if you don't have a blast sensor, I can tell you right now, every one of our coaches is training blast concepts in every lesson and every program that we teach.
I like that you guys are breaking down the structure and that guys are using it. You had a couple key things there that I want to talk about, or at least highlight for our guys. One, it was tracking things over time. I think a lot of times people evaluate off of our data and they change it and then it kind of goes away. But that fact that you're continuously monitoring what's going on. And the second part of that was making adjustments from cage to the game. Are there certain things that you guys have seen that players kind of change as they go more towards competition? Is it usually one way or the other, meaning like, does it get worse? Does it get better? What are some of the things that you guys see since you're so diligent with capture?
I'll tell you, I think the truth holds at the youth and amateur level the same way it does at the pro. The very best players have better swings and harder swings in game. And you could say it's, the hot hand, or they're in the zone, or their intensity goes up because the juices are flowing, whatever statement you use to describe that. And then the players who are challenged, emotionally by the fear of failure, which is just such a huge part of the real challenges in baseball, right? It's a game of failure. We can talk about that all day long. The challenge in baseball is not that it's a game of failure. It's that you can't control the outcomes. So it's what we talked about earlier. You need to be focused solely on the inputs. Were my inputs good? And if you're 0 for 100 and you think your inputs are good, you're looking at the wrong data. Something's wrong, right? Eventually, over time, the results and the story will paint the better picture. But in a weekend, you go 0 for 6 and you hit 5 balls real hard, and you hit one off the end of the bat. You had a great weekend, right? And you have to know, and it's tough because mom, dad, the team, the coach, the scout, they're all saying this guy went 0 for 6. I don't know, you hit, 5 baseballs, 90 plus as a high school ball player in a doubleheader, you're okay. So, for us, what we see is that the guys who are emotionally challenged around fear of failure, the attack angle goes negative, the bat speed goes down, and the bat speed goes way down because intent is completely different. They fall into the trap, right? Just make contact. And if you want to play baseball, don't just make contact. It's a mistake. Or make good contact. Nope, I don't even want to make good contact. If I'm 10, 11 years old, I don't even want to look at home plate. And I know that's sacrilege for so many people. We take batting practice commonly with no home plate. Because if you can hit a baseball and you're 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, swing as hard as you can at that baseball, because that's scalable. Look, Deven Morgan from Driveline, he spells it out in his book. Right? If you want to play baseball as well as you can for as long as you can, you need to build skills that scale. It's not about making contact, because if you just make contact at 10, 11, 12, you're not playing at 13. You will not hit the ball out of the infield. And the only way to really measure that objectively and see what you're doing is not any of the scorebook apps, right? Those are great. They're engaging. They're fun. But if I can see at the end of a game exactly what I did, oh my goodness, I normally swing 60 miles an hour. I just swung 38 miles an hour all game long. What in the world? And I don't realize it, right? Whether it's nerves, adrenaline, whatever it is, I don't realize how poorly I'm performing, that I'm not bringing what I'm capable of doing into the game. So what's more important than that? In my opinion, nothing.
I like that, because you're taking what input you have at the game, to use what you guys are talking about, and you're able to actually show that to the player and say, hey, regardless of what you're getting on the field, look at what you've done to change when you're getting up at the plate. I do like the fact that you guys do batting practice with no home plate. I've heard a couple of big league coaches say that, like, they'll ask, what's the best pitch that you hit the hardest? And everyone's like, oh, a strike or this. And he's like, no, it's whatever pitch you can hit the hardest. Sometimes it's out of the zone, sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low or right there where it is. So hitting the ball hard is great. I also like the fact that you guys are doing that from an early age, because if you wait a little too long and you get to that 13U level and you can't hit the ball out of the infield, it's a harder mountain to climb than someone who's been training there for a few years and is really trying to drive the ball and hit it hard in game. We've talked a lot about kind of capture methods. I like that you guys do so much in-game. Just reviewing for our listeners, you guys are controlling the sensor charging process and the pass out. We see that in a ton of success just because you are part of the process with the team and not fully relying on players to do so. I think that that's great. Can you talk about some of the actual specific metrics that you guys focus on? At Blast, we've got a little over, I think we have 10 metrics, 11. So are there specific ones that you guys focus on and really hone towards?
Yeah, I mean, look, we bucket these things, right? So for us, number one at the youngest age is one thing and one thing only. It's bat speed, because we just want intent, right? We want to build the engine, right? And we get it, right? I don't mind if a 5, 6, 7-year-old doesn't have a perfect swing, whatever that means, right? Because look, their body was growing and so on and so on. We want to know that those kids are going up swinging as hard as they can. That's it. Go swing. Because even if you have swing flaws, at 7, 8, 9U baseball, a flawed hard swing is better than an excellent slow swing. Because look, right, the stats prove it. Hard hit baseballs are hits. Softly hit baseballs with perfect swings are not hits. So yes, let's now combine inputs to outputs to outcomes. Just go swing as hard as you can, right? We'll work on the mechanical. From there, we do look very heavily right next at being on plane, right? And you can do the Luis Horizon 180% of the time he's on plane, right? He's just, when he's sleeping, he's on plane, right? It's incredible. I think we've gotten to the point of realizing, at least as far as we're concerned, that anything over 80% probably has diminishing returns in terms of, bat speed and damage that you can do, because maybe you flattened out too early and you're not gaining that sort of early entry with high bat speed coming into the plane. And that's where the next level comes in for us, which is, we like to think of it as the secret sauce. It's early connection. We love early connection, and we have had some anomalies where people do better with poor early connection. I know Shohei Ohtani is a great example of that, but for the most part, that is a cheat code, right? If you are early connected, and so many people have different definitions for what that word means, it's almost a curse in the baseball industry, right? Everybody means something different when they say connected. Stay connected. Oh, your hip and your shoulder have to be connected. No, they don't. Right? That's not what connected means, at least in blast parlance. Or your hands and your hip. No, stop. Right? I want those things dissociated so they move faster. Understanding that where the barrel is in relation to the spine and maintaining spine angle through the swing up to connection. If I can get that, I have an efficient transfer of energy. Right. And that's so critical because I'm getting the most out of what I have. Right. And I can make the other numbers better if and when I improve upon early connection. But it's a tough sell sometimes with some players because it's hard to feel. It's hard to see. So we've set up some real funky drills where we'll put something tactile behind a batter. The bat needs to touch it so they realize they're at 90 degrees. Otherwise, we have the screen right in front of them so they can see themselves because proprioception's tough at any age. So, early connection is a great unlock for us. And in reality, we don't use scores very much. We actually like the raw data better than we like the scores because it's just a whole lot easier for us to speak to and point out an improvement in a very raw, meaningful way and kind of isolate it from other pieces of the swing. From there, it depends on the player. If we have some players who aren't getting the bat speed, right away, jump on a rotational acceleration, right? If RA isn't high, hey, go get those med balls right now and put double meat in your burrito, right? Because we need to build some strength, and you may have some inefficient movements early in the swing. So the combination of rotational acceleration, early connection are critical for us because they speak to how efficient is my swing going to be. But for the more basic stuff, hey, if you can get plane and bat speed, great. You're going to be better than you otherwise would be.
I'm glad you said that. We might have some listeners that are hearing these metrics for the first time. So I just want to summarize a couple of the ones that you mentioned. And you happen to mention the ones that I particularly like and we fall to here at Blast 2, which is great. Early connection is kind of the starting position of your swing. Like you said, we're measuring the spine angle and the bat at the starting point. We're looking for roughly 90 degrees in that situation. So early connection is really that starting point of your swing. Our on-plane efficiency is kind of like our swing path, being direct to the ball, getting the bat on plane. So we're building good bat speed. And then that bat speed side of it is the intent. So if you were to listen to this and go get a sensor and immediately jump in, you're measuring your starting position, your bat path, and then your speed with intent. And if you do those three things, you're going to be in a good position to succeed. And then, like you said, based on the player, you can kind of adjust and understand what they're doing, what they might need to focus on, and their level of play might change the way you go about that. Do you change the way you implement Blast or talk to players based on their level of play? Is there a progression? Like if you had an 11-year-old versus a high school player, can you talk about some of those differences just so our listeners can hear that?
Yeah, and listen, that's not just unique to age and skill for us. We have some players who love the geometry and physics of hitting. We have others who have said things like, don't tell me the numbers, just tell me what to do. So there's a huge spectrum of approaches. I mean, I think every player is different in the way they, in the way they develop power, but they're also different in the way they learn and different in the way they want to learn and be taught. So we are really, really careful about what and how we share information. It's not that we hold stuff back. It's all out there. We want it to be transparent so a player can look at stuff and say, what is this? What is this? Why is this? Why is that? But with some players, we're just really basic. Hey, do this when you load so that, bat speed will go up. Do this when you load so early connection will be better. But why do we want early connection to be better? So that you're on plane earlier, so that you're building bat speed earlier that's going to actually hit the ball. Why do we want rotational acceleration to be higher? Hey, because the higher it is, the more time you have to make a swing decision and build early bat speed so that you can even be late and hit a ball with power. So we try to, ultimately – we always say we tie features to benefits, right? Telling somebody, oh, you need to improve your rotational acceleration. Well, why? Right? If I'm a player, don't just tell me I need to increase a metric. Tell me what it's going to do so that I understand that and what it is I'm going for. And maybe I'm even more motivated. Like, oh, you go home, dad, coach, I need to improve my rotational acceleration. What's that? I don't know, but it's low. That's not that useful. I feel like a player who's more engaged in understanding about what their goals are and why becomes a more successful player. So again, the communication and the depth, to which we go around the details is unique to every player. And again, within age and skill, but we try to make sure they understand the benefits of what it is that we're focused on. And I'll tell you, I mean, going along with, tying everything together that we're talking about here, we then look at what's early connection, what's connection, right? If you're 90-90, you've got an efficient swing. Other things might be wrong with your swing. We may need to, again, build some strength or whatever it is. But if you're efficient and you're keeping your posture throughout the swing, we know you've got an efficient path to the ball. And then we get even more in depth. Can you keep those angles on different pitches in the zone? And that's where things really start to get interesting because, one of the things we say all the time is first you learn to swing, then you'll learn to hit. And I want to know that those metrics, Kyle, are consistent throughout the strike zone, or more importantly, what we call the hitting zone. Again, I don't care about the strike zone. If you're a young ball player, I don't care. Now, as you get older, nope, if you have great command of the strike zone, you're going to swing at better pitches, you will get more hits. Do you really want to, at 9, 10, 11 years old, put your fate in the hands of an umpire who, with good intention, maybe has a big strike zone? He wants people to swing. I think that's great. He's not calling a major league zone. And look, a major league zone is not always perfect. So we want to know that in the hitting zone, your metrics are consistent or tells a story for something you need to work on.
I like that you guys have such good relationships with the players. And, I've talked about this before where the coach has to act as like a filter for the data. Some guys want to see it and dive in. Some guys just want to be told what to do. And I think that that's where the coach can absolutely never be replaced. And that relationship that you guys have with players is so important, because they need to understand that you guys are there for them and you guys can communicate the information in the best way that they learn. With how many players you guys have, 1,000 players and 70-ish teams, how do you keep the coaching staff all on the same page with what you guys are doing? You guys are a large organization, so I give you guys a lot of credit for being able to do so. So if you can share how you keep the coaching staff on the same message so that, you have some consistency throughout your organization.
I mean, our biggest investment in 15 years as an organization is in finding the right people who share our culture and our approach, and then training them endlessly. I mean, we train every week, all year long, online, offline. We have our own internal training content. We go outside, obviously, to some of our key vendors and partners for more training content. We have small group training, full staff training, hitting training, movement training, communication training, and all of our staff are full-timers. Like, this is not a gig. This is not hey, here's a coaching stipend for a season. This is a career path for us. So, our entire staff, this is all we do. And throughout the year, we are training. And it's a tremendous investment. It's one that I think, will pay off forever, because, the models and methods we use are uniform and consistent throughout the organization. So the experience that ball players have, whether they're with, Coach Kyle or Coach Jordan or whoever, is consistent. We do have some guys who specialize in some topics or ages or skill levels, but everybody is trained uniformly and consistently.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I think with such a large scale, it's really important that you guys do that. We talk about this a lot here at Blast, but Blast is a tool for coaches. There are people out there that think it's going to replace it, or you can just go lean on the numbers, but using it as a tool in your toolbox is the most important. And the coach is irreplaceable. And you guys using Blast as a tool really provides value to not only your organization, but your players as well. I think you guys are doing a great job on how you implement it, and I'm really glad that you're sharing it with our listeners. Can you give some advice for someone that's maybe thinking about bringing Blast on or is just starting? How would you start? What advice would you have for somebody just starting with Blast?
I mean, keep it simple and keep it charged, right? That was one of our early challenges. We'd count on players and their parents to charge their stuff, and they come in, it's not charged. So the original solution we had was to buy a couple extra ones and just put it on somebody's bat, instead of taking an approach of, hey, you don't charge your stuff, that means you don't get to use your Blast, that means you won't get better this week. Hey, that might be a life lesson to teach. For us, we take a client success approach, right? If we ensure the success of all of our players and do everything that they need us to be doing, and that's not to say that we're going to handhold them and make sure they don't make mistakes. No, if you've made a mistake, we'll help you right now. Let's come up with a better process to make sure you're doing it on your own, so it becomes scalable in life. Right? You need to have your phone charged. You need to have your Blast charged. You need to have all that. So we try to make it a short-term win and then a long-term win for everyone involved. So the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, you didn't charge your sensor, too bad for you, is not a good one, right? So investing in the long run to make sure that players improve behooves all of us, right? Our players get better. The organization gets better. The coaches are respected and appreciated, right? That's a long-term play. It's not easy to take that approach if you're counting the beans on a day-to-day basis. And it can be frustrating. You got to look past the frustration to what's down the road a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, in terms of what success might look like. As far as keeping it simple, if you're not an expert in some of the content, don't go down a rabbit hole that you're not ready to, right? Like I said earlier, there are still so many of our players where we're just focused on bat speed and being on plane. And if you don't understand something, don't pretend, because the moment somebody asks a question, if you can't explain it correctly, you've lost trust, right? It's a question of your integrity in the mind of a player. So, For us, it was build this slowly, understand everything we can, ask questions constantly. Go back to your team. Your team's been an incredible part of our success using Blast and developing players. We wouldn't have been able to do it without your team, right? We were coming back with questions every day. And some of those questions spawned more questions and made us smarter about the way we teach. So, 5 years ago, it was an investment. It was an investment of time more than money. Now it's indispensable. I mean, think about it. It's the only tool that goes from cage to game, right? As much as, and don't get me wrong, there are some technologies that we love that we've been with forever. I mean, Hit Tracks is getting better and better and better every day, but there's one tool that is on our players' bats every practice and every game, and that's Blast Motion.
I love that you guys take the holistic and long-term approach. I think that really pans out and really keeps everybody going in the same direction. I'm also glad you said the education piece. You guys do a lot of it on the internal side with training and things like that. If you're listening to this and you want some more information on Blast, we've got a ton of training content. We also have a free certification. If you just Google Blast Motion certification, you can take it's like 7 videos and a 38-question test, get a certificate, so you can learn a ton about Blast in that fashion. I think this ties in. Let's say someone's listened to this episode. They've learned a lot about Blast, what you guys do, some of the metrics that they want to focus on at practice. They're driving in the field right now. They're going to be doing some hitting. Can you share a couple of drills that they could maybe try today, and some focuses on what those drills are that, they could take a New York Empire drill that you guys do or really lean on and actually go use it today?
Sure. I mean, look, a lot of us on our YouTube channel, but I mean, we do some basic stuff, like we borrowed things like offset open from Driveline for the upper half load and lower half stability. Things like Babe Ruths are so critical for us, but we've got some takes on them. Like if you look on our channel, we've got a drill we call the snap drill, which is not what people expect. It's just working on a hip turn into the front side and how to accomplish that and how to, turn that into a sequencing tool. So we get pretty complex on that, but on the simple side, we have 2 favorites right now that are seeing tremendous results. One we call the wrap drill. It's a rear arm path, and we've made it real simple for players where you load into that back arm, and the first move you make as you begin the hip turn and the torso turn is to just flip that hand over, not throw an uppercut punch and change swing plane. Just flip that hand over, because what it does is present the barrel as early as possible without having that back elbow tuck underneath and create that unnecessary or unuseful bat lag. So that rear arm path drill is such a big winner for us, and at every age it's just so easily accomplished. The other one is we call them front arm frisbees, right? You take a frisbee and you throw it with your front arm, and that really does work on swing path for the front arm. And if you wind it up as best you can, right, there's a great load for the front arm as well. So when you combine the wrap with the front arm, you've got a really great swing, at least in the upper half, and then our snap drill for the lower half.
If people want to learn more about some of the content you had said you mentioned, what are some of the best ways that they can get a hold of some of the New York Empire stuff?
Yeah, I mean, most of our stuff is out there on our YouTube channel. Some of it is posted on Instagram, of course, New York Empire Baseball. And then Truth, I mean, look, I mentioned it earlier. Some of the best content in the entire industry is over at Driveline Academy, right? Even though they're focused on the young players, not the Clayton Kershaws of their world, right? Some of their youth content is fantastic because it gets players moving and doing smart movement and building skills to scale. So, a combination of what we're doing with some of that Driveline content, I think is a big win. Another great resource, not to just sit here and plug some folks that I think are brilliant in the industry, On Base U, great content for how to approach young players or older players, quite frankly.
That's great. Just complimenting you on what you've built, the application of what you guys are doing, the holistic approach in the system. I think this was a great episode for listeners to really see how it all ties together with teams, the training facility. You guys have been using technology for a long time. The coaches and what you guys try to bring in from that standpoint, the continuous education, keeping it simple, but being able to be specific to individual player needs. I think this has been a phenomenal episode. Is there any last comments or things you want to leave our listeners with before we go ahead and sign off?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it a bit, being as integrated as you can be and committed to using the technology and the drills and focusing on the inputs is going to bring results, and it requires patience, right? So we always talk about on average over time, right? If the inputs are great, on average over time, you will see success. And there's a quote that we love. Shane Battier once said, a winning organization doesn't mean you win. Having a winning organization doesn't mean you win every game, right? So instead of focusing on winning the game, focus on winning every pitch, and you'll see more wins of games.
That's awesome. Thank you, everybody, for another episode of the Blast Motion Podcast. I'm Kyle Attl here with Jordan Baltimore from New York Empire. We'll see you next episode.
Thanks, Kyle.